program. So you guys are really in a wide range of labs, and I was noticing as you're going through, so many of the PIs that you're working with are PIs that our students work with. You guys probably have encountered some of our students. I heard the Zorn lab, Dr. Brand's lab. So we have a lot of MD PhD students all across UC and Cincinnati Children's. So how many of you have heard about MD PhD? So what do you guys know about it so far? In the back?
It's 8 years long.
It's 8 years long. It can be a long time, yes. What else?
It allows you to become a physician scientist.
Yeah, and so physician scientist, I think that's really the exciting part about our program is that it allows you to bridge your clinical interest, your desire to interact with patients, and this research experience. And this is such a great foundation for you guys to start thinking about how research can really impact the lives of patients. And if some of you are probably working on more translational projects and can see those steps getting closer to how it will impact the patient's life. So I'm going to go through and tell you a little bit about our program. Please stop me at any time. We have, I think, a great amount of time for questions. So just to start, so we have a great leadership for our program. Dr. Karana Hershey, she is at Cincinnati Children's and she runs the division of allergy. So I think Dr. Brand, whoever's in that lab, that's probably her division. Dr. Tim LaCroix, he works in pulmonary medicine. Dr. George Sheep, he's in immunology, and then Catherine Wickenheiser-Brokamp is also in pulmonology, and she's actually a graduate of our program. And so I just think this is important to know that you would be coming into a really supportive environment, an environment where you'd have great mentorship by MD PhDs and other physician scientists. So I think Nora mentioned that really being an MD PhD allows you to be a physician scientist. And what we see that is taking your research from the bench to the bedside. And that happens in a lot of different ways. We have alumni that are working very much on translational projects, clinical trials. We have other researchers or other graduates who are working mostly in the lab in basic science research, but then they have collaborators that they're working with on more translational projects that can then connect to patients. Nobody mentioned this earlier, but tuition and all of your fees are all paid for. So even though it's a long run, 8 years, you are going to come out debt-free, and we also pay you a stipend for your time in the program. So it's just something to think about, certainly not a reason to join the program, but a great benefit. And we really think it allows you to focus your time on research and your medical education, so you don't have to worry about funding it or leaving with a lot of debt. And for those that graduate from our program, the likelihood that you're going to be NIH funded is fantastic. So even though MD PhDs are a small percent of medical school graduates, they make up about 50% of the awardees for NIH awards to physicians. And so if you're thinking in the long run that you want to be a researcher, you want to have a funded lab, this is a great avenue. So 8 years, what does that look like? The first 2 years are spent enrolled in regular M1 and M2 coursework. So when you join our program, you would join with students who are pursuing their MD. You'd interact with them in all of your coursework. And then you have some separate opportunities to engage with your peers. So we have journal clubs. We also have some retreats and seminars that are just for MSTPs. And so that allows you to integrate with our MSTP community, but also really get to know your medical school peers. So before you would start the program, you would have one research rotation, and this is a potential PI, someone whose lab you might join. You would do 2 additional rotations in between your M1 and M2 year. And so what this will allow you to do is get a feel for the different research that's happening at UC and Children's and really decide which lab is the best fit for you. Any questions about the process? So after your second year of medical school, You would take the Step 1 exam, and then you would go ahead and join a PhD program and a lab and start working on your dissertation. So we have 11 programs. So I know some of you mentioned immunology, some folks in molecular genetics, developmental biology. There's really a great range of programs at UC. So we have students in all 11 programs. It also includes biomedical engineering and environmental health. And so one question that I think comes up a lot is, so you're in graduate school for 3 to 4 years, how do you stay connected to the clinic? So we have great opportunities for longitudinal clerkships, and this allows you to work either in a family care practice, we have one in emergency medicine, and we're working on one in neurology. So you keep up with your clinical skills. You also get credit for that clerkship when you would go back to M3, and that really just allows you some more flexibility. And so after you successfully defend, which takes our students about 4 years, we do have some students who are able to finish in 3, we would move on to your last 2 years of medical school. And so at this time, you would go ahead and rejoin a new class of MDs, and you would complete those last 2 years of training. We do have some opportunities for you to continue your research, and we think that's really important, especially as you're moving into residency, thinking about what opportunities at certain universities or institutions might they have for research, and how could you translate your work that you've done here to potentially a new project when you go on to residency. So we do have 11 graduate programs, and right now we have about 115 faculty, and I would guess about 80% of the folks that you guys are working with are also part of our faculty. So a little bit more about our program and the types of oversight we provide. I think this is really key. It's 8 years, and we don't want you to feel like you're out there on your own. We really have a supportive community that is designed to help you meet certain milestones and not make the process feel like you're out there sort of trying to figure it out on your own, and that we don't want to make the process any longer or more challenging than it needs to be. So great oversight. Dr. Deeb, he really provides a lot of help for students, especially at the beginning when they're trying to pick their lab rotations. He's also available for any issues that come up during your medical school and graduate school coursework. We have an enrichment committee, which is, although it's run by Dr. Wickenheiser-Brokamp, we have great student representation on that committee. And this is really the functions of our program that happen outside the curriculum but are designed to aid in your development as a physician scientist. So we host retreats where we talk about the development of grants, the development of manuscripts. We have had career sort of workshops, and really it allows us to all interact as a group but also develop those skills that we think will be essential for you as you go on with your training. Every semester for the first 2 years, you'll have a biomedical science seminar or a journal club. Have you guys been attending journal clubs as part of your? No. If you're really getting into the research that you're doing with your group, I would definitely reach out to them and see if they have a journal club that you could attend, maybe part of that department or part of that graduate program. It's a great way to really start learning about the literature and being able to talk about it. How do you analyze the figures that you're seeing and reading about? So I would definitely encourage you to think about joining one of those. And then of course we have lots of social events, which we think are important for developing the community and really so that you feel like you can trust your group, your peers. Next, we have something that's unique to our program. We're one of the only programs in the country that has a senior physician scientist mentor. And this is someone that you're paired up with when you initially start the program. So it allows you to interact with someone who's a physician scientist who has similar interests to you and potentially has a career that you could see yourself in one day. And the great part about that is they have no stake in your dissertation work. They're really just there to advise you. So I know Dr. Jordan is one of our SPS advisors, and with some really fantastic folks. And then we have lots of student representation. Has anyone met any of our MD PhD students before? Yeah, who have you interacted with?
Actually today, this is like a really weird coincidence, but I attended like one of the journal club meetings,
Okay.
and it was like the presentation was led by Jeff. He's a fourth year MSTP student, Jeff.
Kubrick's, yeah.
Yeah, and he was presenting on his research.
Okay.
So he's been really helpful so far.
Anyone else? I think the nice part about it is that our students are so involved. They're really active in their graduate programs and they're really active in our community. And we look for them to advise us on what we can do better, how we can engage new students, recruit new students here, and really appreciate and value their representation. So a little bit about the ways that you could come into MSTP, and I think this is hopefully going to be relevant to you guys as you're thinking about your trajectory over the next few years in your undergraduate career. So our first student, Corinne Foley, she is a surf student. Has anyone applied for surf this summer? Okay. So she came in, she went to Spelman University. She did surf here for 2 years, and that was a really great way for us to get to know her, for her to sort of see what types of opportunities we have, the different labs that exist, and then she matriculated right after undergrad. So that's one option. Maggie Schneider, she is an M4, she's getting ready to match in the next few weeks, and she spent 2 years after undergrad doing an NIH post-bac. And this is a great opportunity if you really feel like you want some more time in the lab. Maybe you're not prepared to take the MCAT at that time, or you really are just looking for a different experience, maybe outside of Cincinnati. We highly recommend this post-bac program, and we've seen a lot of great applicants come through it. Oftentimes they come in with publications, and so that can be a nice way to build your application. Calvin Chan, he is a G1, he's in immunology, and he completed the master's program in systems biology at UC. So coming out of undergrad, he felt like he really needed to take some more coursework in the biomedical sciences, boost his sort of math and science GPA. And this gave him an opportunity not only to do that, but also interact with our program. So that's another option to consider. UC isn't the only university with these types of programs. Sometimes they're labeled as special master's programs, and they can really be a great option. And then finally, Keith Song, he transferred from our MD program. So he ended up sort of thinking late into his senior year that he wanted to do MD PhD. But by that time, he had already applied to MD programs and he didn't feel prepared to submit an application to an MD PhD program. He hadn't had a ton of research experience, but he knew he loved it. And so right when he got on campus, he got in contact with our office, and we worked with him over those first 2 years, and then he was able to transfer. And so some students, they are really focused on getting their MD, being a physician. They've had a lot of experience or some experience in undergrad, but maybe they're not sure if that's what they want to do. We've also had other students come in who didn't realize how much they would miss being in the lab, and so they were so focused on MD, but it really was right for them to be an MD PhD. Yes?
For the student who went through CERF,
Yeah.
was that the MSTP specific CERF, or was that any of the CERF, or like one of the CERF programs?
So one summer she did the CCHMC CERF, another summer she did our MSTP CERF, but we've had students come from all of the programs. Just to give you an idea, it's a really great question. This past year we interviewed 60 people. 5 of them had participated in CERF, and of those 4 of them we've accepted. So I think that CERF is a really great pipeline, and even if you apply to CERF but you don't get in this summer, you let us know. We'd still love to have you, be part of some of our programming if you're going to be doing research here anyway. It just really gave us a chance to get to know her. Any other questions? So, the application process. Are you guys familiar with the process to applying to MD? A little bit? So So for most of you, if you decide to apply, you'll take the MCAT during the spring of your junior year, summer of your junior year, and then during that summer, you'll start submitting your applications through AMCAS. And so at that time, you would be able to choose which universities you want to apply to and whether or not you want to apply both MD and MD PhD. And so that gives you a chance if you're not sure which program you want to go into or you want the most options. The strongest applicants right now, they have about a 3.75 GPA. Their average on the old MCAT is a 35. We're just taking applicants this year for the first time who've taken the new MCAT, and their average right now of those who've accepted is about the 90th percentile. So obviously it's a competitive program, but it doesn't mean, these are averages, it doesn't mean that we're not reviewing each application. We spend a lot of time in our review process looking individually at not only your GPA and your MCAT, but your research experience, your motivation to pursue an MD, PhD, and all of those other great extracurricular activities you've been involved in, shadowing, working in the community, and we take that all into consideration. So it's not to say that if you score below a certain MCAT score or have a certain GPA, it doesn't mean you won't be competitive. So this year we ended up interviewing 60 applicants, and then we will try and matriculate about 8 to 10 students this year. So we accept some portion of that 60%, usually about a third of them will get accepted. We have some great fellowships for those of you who are interested in developmental biology. Dr. Jeff Whitsitt, if you're over in the developmental biology department, it would behoove you to try and meet him or just say hello. He's really a phenomenal researcher. He created a surfactant treatment which helps develop lungs in preemies. So he's really just a phenomenal physician scientist and someone who we really honor and appreciate him being part of our program. So each year we'll select a Whitsitt Fellow. This person will agree to join our program and do their PhD in developmental biology. They'll also have the opportunity to interact with Dr. Whitsitt, and he'll serve as their mentor throughout the time in the program. We recently developed a Sabin Fellowship, and this is for students interested in immunology. And so we realized in the past few years immunology has become a pretty popular program for our students, and we have a lot more interest coming from our applicants. And so this will work similar to the Whitsitt Fellowship, with the exception that we don't have a designated Jeff Whitsitt to be your mentor, but because immunology has really a wide range of programs and faculty members, we would work with you to find the right mentor. There's also some opportunity to have funded international travel. See this as a benefit, especially you think about different diseases, different techniques, different communities that you could work with internationally. We know a lot of students are coming in with an interest to serve abroad, and so we think this is a great way to fund that as part of a research or clinical experience. So where you guys are now, are most of you first-year students? A few second-year students? So for us, what we would like to see and what we would recommend, if this is really the pathway that you see yourself headed down, is to engage in the research. I've heard Megan say that you can have the opportunity to continue your work in the lab. If it's something that you love and you see yourself maybe headed down this pathway, we would highly encourage it. Whether or not you stay in the same lab, that's up to you, but thinking down the road when we're reviewing applications, we want to be able to read an application and hear from someone who can talk in-depthly about their research, who really knows and understands why it is that you're doing this research, not just how to do it. So in that case, it may be beneficial to stay in the same lab. We've also had great applicants who have really tried out different labs during their undergraduate career. I know some of you applied for CERT, and so feel free to follow up with me afterwards if you have. Even if you didn't apply to MSTP, we can make sure that we're reviewing your applications and we have a timely response for you. We did get a lot of applications this year, but we'd love to know if you applied. And so in the next few years, really continue to think about preparing your application, shadowing physicians, continuing your research, and then starting to study for the MCAT. That can be a little bit daunting, a little bit scary, but there's some great opportunities that you see to study. So someone in our medical school office, they run an MCAT prep course, but really taking the time to prepare for that. Although it's just part of your application, it does show us that you are prepared to take the M1 and M2 coursework. And as you see yourself sort of progressing on, if you feel like you want to take some time off, there are some really excellent opportunities. I mentioned the NIH post-bac. There's also some fantastic master's programs. And each year, about half of our students come straight out of undergrad and half come after having taken some time off. So you really can't go wrong there. It's about what's the best fit for you and what's going to make you the strongest applicant. Any questions? Everyone feel like they could apply tomorrow to get in?
Can you clarify a little bit between the MSTP SURF and just for those that might not understand?
Yeah. So graduate education at UC College of Medicine, they run or sort of organize about 7 SURF programs. And so graduate education has one, Cincinnati Children's has one, SURF, MSTP, neuro, and pharmacology. And really, there's pretty limited differences. We all engage in shared programming. So we have some professional development opportunities, social events, career fairs, those types of activities that we all work together on and all SURF students can attend. For those in our SURF program, we will set you up with a shadowing experience. We'll also invite you to attend our journal clubs and have some other interactions with our leadership and students.
Just out of curiosity, why did you guys decide to split the medical years and then just clump the graduate year together?
Yeah, so nationally, most schools do it that way, and the thought was that after M1 and M2, that's really an ideal breaking point because you've had 2 years of biomedical coursework, and a lot of that coursework can then count towards your PhD coursework, so it takes the time away. The other part is that going into residency, you want to have the strongest clinical skills possible, and so keeping those at the end felt like was really necessary rather than doing your MD at the beginning and then your PhD at the end. Some other programs, they will have like a shortened M1, M2 year, so maybe it's 1.5 years or a year long, but for the most part, they're structured that way.
Thank you.
So I know there are like MDs, just strictly MD, who are able to still conduct research. So like, what are the limitations of having an MD and doing research?
So certainly no limitations if you have the skills and the training to go ahead and do that. One thing that we like to think about, so the great part of an MD PhD is that you have a dedicated 3 to 4 years to really train as a researcher. You hopefully have a fantastic PhD advisor who can train you to think like a scientist. Not so much the area of research you're in, while that's important, those techniques are likely to change, 6 years later by the time you get out of your residency and fellowship, but it's really having that training. The other part is, although we know sort of the number of MD PhDs that graduate, we don't know the number and go on to have research careers. We don't know the number of MDs that try to. And so while there are certainly success cases like Dr. Deep, who's on our leadership, and Dr. Whitsitt, it's unclear how many really try to do that and aren't able to. We've talked with, we had a career panel a few years back, and someone who's an MD only, he said it was really challenging to get back in the lab after fellowship. So you're in the lab with a bunch of people who are 10 years younger than you. They're really up to speed, and you're doing a lot to catch up. You also have a lot of clinical pressures and duties at that time. So it's certainly possible, and definitely doable if you feel like going the MD route's better for you.
So would an MD, PhD, like physician scientist, would he or she split their time between like the clinic and the lab? Like, is that a pretty like normal occurrence, or is it usually like they spend their time like mostly in the lab, or how does that really work?
So it really depends on the person. What you'll hear a lot is there's this typical 80-20 split. So you spend 80% of your time in a research lab, 20% of your time in clinic. So for our director, Dr. Hershey, she spends 1 half day a week in clinic. The rest of the time she runs a basic science research lab. We have other faculty and other graduates who are spending more like 50-50, and it depends a little bit on your specialty, where you are in your career, and really what your interests are, what your goals are. So there's no, like, you have to do this or you have to do that. It just depends on really what your interests are and really where you are at that point in your career. We see down the road that a lot of our graduates end up in administration, and so maybe less research, more clinical duties, and then administrative duties.
So if the main emphasis of getting your MD, PhD is going to be on your PhD part, what's the advantage of getting your MD?
Yeah, so I think for those of you who are really interested in being able to interact and engage with patients, the MD is essential. If you want to have any type of clinical career, then you need an MD. As a PhD, unless you're maybe in clinical psychology, chances are you're not going to have a lot of opportunities to interact with patients. It also gives you a chance, you really are able to speak both languages. So a lot of times, PhDs are so focused on their research, they're going deep into one topic, where MDs have a chance to think broadly about how this could impact their patients' lives, and the types of treatments or new and novel techniques to treating disease are necessary. So it's being able to connect those two, and really being able to have that crosstalk.
So if you were to specialize in something like surgery, where you would be doing it more often throughout the week, do you think that would still be feasible to do MD?
Yeah, definitely. So we've had, I don't have this slide up here, we've had a number of graduates go into surgery, and so for folks who go into, say, surgery or emergency medicine, where it's more shift work in a way, you're on for a certain number of hours and then you're off, you're conducting your research in your off time. Where other folks maybe in immunology or pediatrics they're integrating that into their week. And so it's certainly feasible. A lot of our graduates who've gone into surgery have really been interested in sort of biomechanics and orthopedics, but there's lots of opportunities there.
Good. And are you free to hang out for a few minutes?
Absolutely, yeah, and I'd
Yeah.
love to show you guys. We have a nice video of our students talking.
Oh
if that's
yeah,
okay.
definitely.